Oh, we are recording. And I'll start the webinar maybe in about 2 minutes. I'll tell you. Okay, I'm going to start the webinar here. And then at the top of the hour, I'll make my first announcement that we're going to wait for about a minute. And then I'll start about a minute or so after the top of the hour. Okay? So if you can, I'm going to start the webinar. If you could share the title slide, biology, that would be good. When people come on, they know where they are. So here we go. We'll start. Have a good webinar. Starting now. Welcome everyone to the webinar Implementing and Managing Argo CD in Production. We will start in about a minute. There are still many people joining. We'll get started in just a bit. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the webinar, Implementing and Managing Argo CD in Production. My name is Mark Levy. I'll be hosting today's webinar, and I focus on product marketing here at OpsMX. First, a couple of housekeeping items. The session today is about 50 minutes long. We're recording the session. We'll send the recording and the slides to everyone. Please ask any questions in the chat, and we'll answer the questions after we're done. We'll have a presentation and a demo. Before I introduce the speaker, what we'd like to do is conduct a poll, actually 2 poll questions, to find out exactly where you are in your Argo journey and what are your top challenges. So I'm going to launch the poll now. See if you can get it. If you could spend, please spend the time for the next 30 seconds or so and answer the polls. It will help us better, help Balaji better in the presentation itself. And while you're answering that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Balaji Siva. Balaji is VP of Product and Business Development at OpsMX. Balaji brings 12 plus years of experience in product management and marketing and enterprise software. Prior to OpsMX, Balaji was the head of product management at Cisco for his cloud native solutions and network virtualization products. Balaji, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Mark. Great to be here, and I'm great to see a lot of interest in this topic around Argo CD.
Great. Well, why don't we just spend a couple more seconds, please, if you haven't already, add to the polls. We'll end that, and then we'll turn it over to Balaji. So let's do that. We'll end the polls. Share our results. And then why don't you take over, Balaji?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for responding to the polls. And looks like there's a sort of an even mix of people who are looking at evaluating, piloting, and whatnot. And Mark, if you don't mind, can you share the poll again, the results for the second question? I didn't get a chance to say it. There you go. All right, so I guess it looks like it's almost an even mix in terms of you know, where you are in the journey. Looks like more in pilot and some in basically equal parts in production and evaluation. That's great. And in terms of top challenges, it looks like you know, your day 0 installation is 1/3 of you had expressed thing, and then day 1 actually is in the configuration part seems to be the largest with almost 50-60% of people, and performance and scaling is another 43%, and workflow complexities seems like another 60%. So it's a pretty interesting mix here, and we will definitely cover some of these topics and tips later. Thank you. All right, with that, just a quick introduction of OpsMX and what we do, and hopefully you've heard of us. If not, it's an opportunity to know us. We essentially intelligent CI/CD platform company, and we work with open source projects such as Spinnaker and now with Argo. Our role, I mean, we would love to help you ship your software better and faster. You can see some of the names of our customers in the bottom. Pretty large size customers, as well as a wide variety of customers, as you can see there. And we'll be happy to work with you and understand your requirements. Many customers that come to us when they're using Spinnaker product and continue to use Spinnaker product, a Spinnaker open source project. Now, as they start evaluating GitOps style of deployments with Argo, our platform basically was extended to support both products. So I think in a way, we can provide you ability to do pipeline-based workflow method with Spinnaker and GitOps with Argo. And we'll talk more about that in the demo, etc. So I think obviously many of you are already using Argo or evaluating Argo, but just as a level setting, obviously what's driving the need to do Argo, right? I mean, obviously Kubernetes adoption is mainstream. Everybody using Kubernetes and rolling deployments and trying to figure out live issues happening during the rollout is a big challenge. And also you don't know what was deployed and how do you detect the drift that happened in production. So there's a lot of challenges if you're not using something like an Argo at this point. So Argo, that's why it's actually very developer friendly in a way that you can maintain the whole state of the application in the Git in a declarative fashion, and let Argo and Kubernetes take care of ensuring that your version, what your intent is actually implemented and maintained in production, right? And that's really nice. And also, since it's version control, you can see what's actually deployed in production as well as be able to quickly roll back. So this is really something that is why the Argo CD is becoming very popular. And also with the extension that's been added, and we'll talk about in the next slide, you're now able to do safe progressive delivery and other work orchestration as well, to ensure basically from core to cloud, basically developer to Kubernetes in this case. And the basic premise, as you probably obviously know, is maintain everything in Git, and you can make a commit change in the Git, and then Argo CD essentially ensure that the application status is synced to the Kubernetes, the actual production state. So there are actually, if you look at Argo CD, there's actually, it's a collection of projects. Argo CD, obviously the most famous one, it has three components underneath it, but essentially this is the one that API server is essentially the UI, and it does many of the things that you expect. And then the repository service is an integrated service inside Argo CD, and the app controller is the one that talks to the Kubernetes and maintains the status between your Git and the Kubernetes live deployment. It is typically deployed within the cluster. Obviously, you can you could actually have Argo CD deployed in a more central look and have multiple clusters connecting to it. But typically, what I've seen is people are deploying Argo CD in a cluster and for the rollout of application in that cluster. So as you obviously add more Argo CDs, the management of that could be a challenge itself, right? In that sense, and something you have to think about it. But typically, it's a team-specific thing, and a dev team may deploy something, a production team may deploy an Argo CD server to deploy the deployments there. Obviously, you can deploy quickly when you change a Git into the Kubernetes. Obviously, then you realize that, okay, I don't want to just quickly update the version in production, particularly for production deployments. I want to be able to do it safely. And that's where the Argo rollout comes in, where it introduces the ability to do progressive deliveries, right? Either through well-known techniques like candidate deployments or blue-green deployments. Candidate deployment is you essentially have small portion of traffic, new version taking small portion of traffic, and then the rest of the traffic is taken by the existing version. Then you can do a comparison and decide if you should roll forward. In the case of progressive delivery, you can have multiple steps, from 25, 50, 75, 100, for example. Blue-green is basically you're switching the traffic over to the new version, and again, evaluating it. If you feel like the new version is good, then you let it go. You can eliminate the old version, or if you want to roll back quickly, you can immediately roll back. So essentially, these are the two options that supported. One of the things what people are finding is that now that I'm having lots of deployments, a lot of rollouts happening, one of the user that we're working with, they have almost 10,000 pods, going through some sort of a canary or blue-green at any point in time. That's a lot of things to evaluate. So when you are rolling out like this way, even though you're staggering or you're doing a progressive rollout, you still have to evaluate the new version compared to the baseline version. If you do it manually or in an ad hoc fashion, you even miss out on some key things that maybe not be right about the new version. So we have Argo CD rollout has a concept of an analysis. So you can automate the analysis so that you're not making manual judgment of every time. And we have made some enhancements. OpsMX has made some enhancements so that you can look at a few more things, and I will talk to you about it in a second. But basically, net Argo CD is almost used 100% of anybody using Argo. Argo rollout is actually increasingly getting used. I did a poll in the Argo Slack about a month ago, and I found out that 15 to 20% of people are using Argo rollout as well, right? It's not 100%, but if almost everybody uses Argo CD, and about 20% of the Argo CD users are using rollout. So if you're not using rollout, you should definitely consider it, particularly for production deployment. The other part people have found out is, okay, Argo CD allows you to take my YAML and deploy it to production. That's great. But what about the steps before that? Like, what about CI steps or other steps that are there before I push something to production? So that's where the workflow comes in. So it's basically, think of it as a Kubernetes-native workflow or a pipeline model. So you can define a series of steps, and that executes basically what your actions are. Essentially, if you think about something like a Spinnaker, you have multiple stages within Spinnaker pipeline. In this case, these are the workflow. This is a workflow is equivalent to a pipeline, and you can have those actions basically to complete from code commit to build to other steps along the way. And this is useful, obviously, so that you can have a Kubernetes native workflow or pipeline end to end. Now, each step is actually a Kubernetes pod that spins out and does the work, and then next step is again another Kubernetes pod. Obviously, sometimes it could lead to scaling challenges, so you should consider like a plugins for scalability, so that you're not creating for every step. If you're doing lots of rollouts or lots of workflow, you want to have a plugin model so that it is scalable. The last part is the Argo events, which is essentially, again, it's an event-driven framework, which is actually needed. For example, if something happens, you need to trigger a workflow, you want to make sure basically Argo event takes care of that. So it has about 20 integrations for different types of events that could essentially then trigger workflow or Argo CD or something like that. Essentially, Argo events is essentially it listens to events and essentially then triggers the different components. So these are all the projects. So you may what I've seen is that 30% of the users from the survey I did. I was hoping to put the survey in here, but unfortunately it didn't. Maybe when we do the send out the slides, well, we'll include that survey data. But basically, almost 100% people use Argo CD, and then 15-20% uses rollout, and then Argo workflow is kind of picking up. People are trying to use workflows. 30-40% are using workflows now, and obviously you need events for the workflow, so that sort of goes with it. I also saw from your feedback early on that you are having complexity in workflows. Workflow is still an earlier stage in terms of maturity compared to the CD, and there's still a lot of things missing in terms of like a full enterprise workflow pipeline. Basically, if you take a look at our product on the Spinnaker side, we have about 70 integrations with the different tools that are part of your CD lifecycle or DevOps tools. In workflow, obviously, we don't have all of those, and so ability to connect them quickly. Also, there's less workflow templates available for you to like sort of drag and drop, and that's another challenge. So there's a lot of it's still evolving, and this is an area where we as a company feel like we can help, and that's why we are actually working in this space and helping large users of Argo get to production. So here's some of the challenges we heard talking to Argo users. And if you're seeing other use cases, other sort of challenges you're facing, feel free to put in the chat or a Q&A section so that we can understand some of your challenges and maybe try to address them in the Q&A or maybe follow up with you. So here are some of the challenges. If you think about Argo, there's two sort of personas or users of the product or users of the project. One is the operator, who sort of think of it as an administrator. They're responsible for maintaining Argo instances, etc. And the user is actually the typical developer or DevOps engineer who's actually using Argo CD or Argo projects to deliver their application to production, etc. So the challenges are different for each of them. For the operator, it's primarily about how do I maintain or manage one or more instances of Argo, right? And if you're some companies where there's a more centralized model, then you have hundreds of Argo or maybe a few Argos that you need to maintain and manage. And you want to make sure that they're running the same version, they're running the secure version. If there are vulnerabilities, you want to take care of patching all of them. You need to make sure that they are highly available, and if there's something failure, how do you recover? All of these are some of the challenges that they are facing. If you're just a single Argo instance user, maybe you don't have the problem, but many people have multiple instances and they want to be able to manage all of them together. The other part is ability to connect enterprise SSO for RBAC, ability to onboard developers and apps with RBAC. And these are sort of, it's possible, but they're definitely not easier for some of the operators we talked to. You also have to manage different cluster credentials. You want to make sure that the cluster credential stays local. You don't want to share cluster credentials to many people actually, and also managing application secrets. I mean, that's another challenge that people have. You want to make sure that you have visibility for the applications that are running across different clusters. Even, for example, you may want to look at an app from a user perspective. You may want to look at an app that is spanning across multiple Argo instances. Maybe there's a dev Argo and a QA Argo and a production Argo, for example. You want to be able to look at that application across all of them. So that's something is a challenge. If you have to manage individually, then how do I look at it across the whole thing? Performance monitoring and scaling. I think we saw that that's one of the challenges that was also talked about in this particular feedback, the survey we did just now. And one of the complaints we heard is there's too many notifications, right? You have to be able to filter the notification and be able to make actionable events out of it. So you have too many notifications, and it doesn't really help when to act. The other part is ability to basically audit audit for security reasons or compliance reasons. What's happening within all of your clusters, right? Who's doing changes, who's deploying what, and that's a challenge for the sort of the operator persona. On the user side, I think one of the biggest things we have seen is if you're trying to do an end-to-end delivery process, these templates are not there, right? For workflow has been, I think, is not the easiest for people to kind of do right now, and so. Can I have a turnkey template for a common use case, a CI workflow step, for example? I want to be able to do that. Another thing is that how do I promote between different stages, from dev to test to staging to production? And if it's actually across Argo CD instances, how do I promote? When do I make the decision to promote? And during rollout, you want to be able to quickly roll out by doing analysis in an automated fashion. So if you want, there could be gaps there. For example, we found that all the monitoring tools are not currently supported as a metrics driver. So if you have something that is not there, then we don't have an ability to do that. And also, if you're need to look at logs as well, there's no way to look at logs currently. At the same time as you're doing evaluations or something happening in the logs, how do you make sure that that's captured as a data point to stop the rollout, right? Besides just looking at the CPU or other kinds of metrics for rollout. And also one of the challenges I guess right now is that if you're using application sets to deploy applications across multiple clusters, and the rollout currently is sort of limited to single cluster. So you want to be able to do that also. That's something we say. And we also talked about like the tools integrations, right? One is we talked in the previous step was around, hey, I'm using something else that's not supported in the metrics driver for analysis, which is on the rollout side. But also I'm missing integration, let's say with Jira or ServiceNow or any other tools that you think of that you may be using that needs to be integrated as part of the workflow steps, for example. There's also challenges, obviously, in terms of troubleshooting app deployment failures. I think that's something people talked about as visibility and be able to look at that and troubleshoot that quickly. And if you have existing application or you're using existing tools like Jenkins or Spinnaker or something else in between, you want to be able to convert that workflow basically, or a pipeline, whatever you want to call it, to an Argo-based workflow, for example. So there's no automation there, right? There's no way to do it with one click or whatever. So you need to really figure out how to do it in Argo, and that's a challenge. The other part is visibility. We talked about is if you're, the app is deployed across multiple Argos, as an app owner, for example, you may want to have visibility. What's running in production cluster? What's running in staging cluster? Did my latest change actually make it to the production or not? Those kind of questions. Also, you want to understand, how's your team doing in terms of overall deployments, number of deployments, and how many deployments or syncs are failing, or how many rollouts are failing. All of those kind of data points are useful because it helps you to be better, like so the DORA metrics, right? Deployment frequency, for measuring your DevOps performance. So these are some of the challenges, and I think as a vendor here, we took these feedback and say, how can we help the community to make it better? And we are contributing to open source, and we also have obviously a solution that helps you, solve some of these challenges that you see here. In any contributions we're making to the actual core project will obviously go into the open source, but the layer that we have built on top, which is either a SaaS or a this thing, we do have it as a solution, like a SaaS solution. So before I go there, very quickly, what we do as a platform, like I mentioned before, we support both Spinnaker and Argo today. So if you're using Spinnaker and considering Argo and want to have a platform that basically merges the two, and have some people use pipelines and some people maybe use GitOps set of deployments, you can do that, right? So that's something we do. It's called OpenCD. The way we solve some of the sort of the end-to-end process challenges is basically, we're building an intelligent automation layer on top, which you can enable policy. For example, if you want to have a policy, automated policy or a governance policy or security policy between stages or in between stages or always, and those kind of things we can enable. And if you want to do an approvals where you look at different data sources and bring it all together, and then you have better informed approvals, those things we can do. And also the analysis piece we talked about, where in this case we call it a continuous verification, but essentially is that automated verification during rollout. Not only the log metrics, but also not only the typical metrics, as well as the log data sources as well. So we have about 15, 20 sources of log and metrics data that you can use, even though you may not have a metrics driver that is currently in the Argo community right now. And we are adding that as a plugin or job model into the analysis, so you can quickly use that analysis in your Argo rollout. So this is a platform. I don't want to. I mean, this is just take from one quick takeaway is that if you are trying to have a team where you have a pipeline requirement deploying the VMs, functions, and then also Kubernetes. Today Argo is essentially a Kubernetes GitOps only platform. And so, you know, you can look at our ISD full platform solution if you like. Let me get into the demo. This is basically the Argo side of the demo. Give me a second. So this is the Argo side of the product. Essentially, what we have today is a platform that is either you can it's a SaaS offering or an on-prem offering. So you can essentially run this platform either on-prem or SaaS, and that allows you to basically manage one or more instances of Argo readily, right, quickly. So for example, one is we do distribution of Argo, which is hardened. We make sure that all the vulnerabilities are taken care of. And we also support open source Argo. So meaning if you're saying, hey, I don't want you to give your distribution, just help me manage my multiple Argo instances, we can do that too. So that's not a problem. So basically, you can manage multiple Argo instances. You have the ability to, if you use your distribution, we have done all the work in terms of integrations, advanced templates, and all the things that you may need, right? I mean, we are continuously adding different things to help you become better at enterprise use case. This is just only an early stage for us, and so if you would like, we're looking for partners and beta customers, basically, that will allow us to guide us in there. And whenever we make some contribution to the core of Argo, we will obviously open source it. So it'll basically help the community as well in terms of what you're working with, right? So basically, anything that sort of like generate things, will absolutely open source it, and so you can have basically community get it as well. So once you integrate it with all the Argo, we provide an ability to audit everything that's going on, across multiple Argos, provide insights, basically data metrics type of to measure the DevOps performance. We're also looking at for the workflow specifically, we're looking at how do I do better approvals in the workflow steps, and also integrate with policy. So we already integrated policy with our existing Spinnaker-based product, and we want to basically have policies, controls as part of the Argo workflow as well. And we talked about the rollout analysis with the ML-based rollout analysis for logs and metrics. So if you're using our SaaS product, it'll be obviously highly available and SOC 2 compliant platform. But if you just want our platform on-prem, you can do that also. So again, they're open to suggestions and open to collaboration, and let us know. Let me do a quick demo of the product. Give me a second. So this is basically the platform, which is again manages the multiple Argos. So in this case, we have a couple of Argos, a production Argo and a QA Argo. You can obviously add more Argo instances if you like, and then we'll manage it for you from here. So you can then essentially configure it and upgrade it, downgrade it, all of the things you can do from this console. So once you have integrated the Argo, again, we can work with OSS Argo if you have only OSS Argo. We can also give you our version, basically just a upstream, fully upstream version. We just package it together for you. And if you want that, you can also use that. And once you have connected to it, now you can see all the applications and status across all of the Argos that you have. Either you have, let's say in this case, 2 Argos. I can see all the applications across all of these Argos. Some of the Argo applications are in QA and some of them are in production, right? And you can go from here. Obviously, you can see, what's the source repository URL for the particular thing is, what's the current revision of the particular application is, and all from here. And you can obviously go to the Argo directly also, so you can see what's happening there. Obviously, you know how to manage the Argo UI. In this case, it's degraded because of progressive override has failed because of some analysis failure. So this is where we can add analysis. For example, if you're doing a rollout, for example, and you want to add analysis, if you're doing a canary strategy and you have, let's say in this case, few steps to roll it out, you can add an analysis, obsolete analysis in between the steps. So typically what happens is you just pause and then you can either add the default analysis, which is very basic, or you can add an analysis. And then it'll give you the result right here, right? So you can add analysis. I'll show you in a second. You can look at the application status, and we can look at in this case, you can look at the rollout itself. And for example, I'm just going to go to the failed rollout, and you will see that how this is actually connected to the Argo rollout. Let's see here. So for example, this is a rollout YAML, right, that you're probably familiar with when you're doing rollout. So in this case, we are defining the strategy as canary. And obviously you can see the steps here, like 25, 50. And within the canary step, in this case 25, there's an analysis section here. And that's where you are essentially specifying how to do the analysis. This is the automated analysis part of it. Here, the template in this case is our ISD analysis. And that's how we are doing the analysis in there. Once you've done the analysis, we will essentially give you a score, and that will either terminate the rollout or complete the rollout. So for example, in this case, I'm just going to show you one that failed. Obviously, successful ones are great, but the failed ones, for example, we look at the log of the new version compared to the baseline version. So in this case, we did analysis where we found some issues. There are critical errors that we found in the new rollout that wasn't there in the previous baseline version, or it could be even the seriousness of it in terms of volume as well. Like you say, one issue is okay, or one, now it's 3, so it may be a little bit of a challenge as well. So based on that, we score. If there's critical errors, we obviously score at 0 because it's critical. But if it's not critical error, if it's just a warning or something, then the score will be higher. In that case, it will pass the rollout step. Obviously, you can specify what score level you want to go for the next step, but this essentially gives you the option to do that. We also can do the metric analysis, which is essentially comparing different key metrics essentially here. In this case, CPU usage by pod name. So the baseline and the canary is compared. And if there's a significant deviation, that's also fails. In terms of what data sources you can connect to, here are some of the data sources you can connect to, right? AWS CloudWatch, AppDynamics, Datadog, all of these are different data sources you can connect to. If you look at the existing rollout, you may not have all of these in there. And that's why this is useful, so that we essentially be able to provide you to connect to any of your data sources. If something is missing, let us know. So that's the analysis part. Now, you now have visibility of the same app across production and different clusters. You also get the insights, which basically shows you what's the deployment frequency in your CD cluster. For example, prod, if you just want to do prod versus QA, for example, you can see there's nothing happening in QA side because I think in the last 7 days, but in the prod, there are some deployments. So you can deploy which applications is actually getting most deployed, and many other data sources, many other interesting data points. You also get to be able to do audit. I mean, the thing people like about the audit is that you can keep the audit as long as you want. And that's something useful because you don't have to worry about storing it somewhere else. So we connect to this Argo CD and collect all the events and all the deployments data, and then store it here. And you can also look at one or multiple Argo CDs. In the future, we talked about having workflow integration as well as having policy and approval gates. And in a future webinar, we'll talk about it. For now, we allow you to manage multiple Argo CDs, everything for insights and audit, and give you an ability to do analysis that's better for rollout. So we are working with sort of large Argo users today, and they really like the analysis piece that we're working with, as well as the manageability of Argo across all of the platforms, across all of the Argo instances. So we did the demo. I mean, why you should work with us. Obviously, we will help you. We will essentially manage for you. We will support for you. We will do, if you're doing SaaS instance, we can help you with essentially running and managing all the Argo CDs in a SaaS solution. Is basically, you still manage it, but essentially a SaaS platform. We have a lot of expertise in helping large enterprises, as you saw from the our customer logos, to go through their deployment of for all enterprise types of apps, from VMs to containers and functions. So we can help you with essentially helping you with advanced enterprise tool integrations or workflow steps that's missing, workflow templates, and many other things that we productize it and make it available for you out of the box. And that's something you can use to quickly get Argo CD in production. If you want to play with the Argo, we have an Argo playground. So if you go to that URL that you see there, you can actually get hands-on with our Argo playground. Essentially, it's Argo running in our SaaS instance, and you can actually, if you're not familiar with Argo, that is, you can actually go and play with the Argo instances, Argo CD, and get familiar with it. We also have the platform I just showed you, we call it the ISD for Argo platform. Just contact us at info@opsmx.com, and we are essentially working with select customers right now, and we will be happy to work with you as well. With that, any questions, Mark, that I can answer?
Great. Thank you, Balaji. Great demo and presentation. Yeah, we have a couple questions coming in first. So a couple questions. One is around sort of migration tools. Question, do you have any Spinnaker Argo migration tools or services or thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Hendrik, thanks for the question. Thanks for, basically, we are one of the top 3 contributors in the Spinnaker community. So we know Spinnaker very, very well. And I wouldn't say we have like a magic tool that does it for you, but absolutely we have the expertise and we are working, actually, one of the things that we are working on is essentially creating these workflow templates that you can just use out of the box, right? And I think we have some templates in works already that, based on our experience of working with Spinnaker, obviously, like how can I, do the same thing in Argo, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we have those. Now, I wouldn't call it a tool, but you take a pipeline and just convert it in your pipeline into our tool. But definitely, I'm happy to talk to you. I think this is you look like an interesting use case for us, because in the sense that a customer that we work with, because essentially, you fit the right profile in terms of migration piece.
Yeah, Hendrik has a follow-up question too around, which sounds really interesting, figuring out thresholds for rollout analysis as well, if you see that question, Balaji.
Yeah. So we have a wizard that allows you to set up these what we call templates, log and metric templates. I know the word template is overused, but yeah, that wizard basically allows you to select the log messages as well as the metrics as well. So yes, the answer is yes to that.
Great. And again, everybody, please enter your questions into the chat window or the Q&A window. A couple more questions, Balaji, that came in. One is around GitOps style deployments for non-Kubernetes environments, particularly AWS EC2.
Well, that's a very interesting question. So we do support. So basically, as you know, Argo CD is primarily a Kubernetes-native GitOps style deployment. It works great, awesome. We support it, no problem. but also people have asked us about obviously GitOps style for EC2. So we support that through our Spinnaker products. Spinnaker has a project called Keel that allows GitOps style deployment to AWS. So if you're interested in AWS GitOps style deployment for like not only containers, definitely we can support that through our ISD platform.
Great. And one other one that came in, you know, in your architecture slide over to the left, you have this idea and concept of autonomous teams. Can you talk about sort of how that's supported, you know, whether it's self-service, security model, how are autonomous teams supported within the platform?
Yeah, so so number one, you know, typically, like I mentioned, individual teams may have their own Argo CD that they want to manage or even support. So we have a team concept within the product that allows you to, you think of it as autonomous teams need different tools, different controls. They want to be the administrators in some cases. So they just want, but you still want to have the ability to have a centralized control or centralized management or visibility for compliance and other reasons, or best practice sharing for other reasons. So we have a construct within this thing, you know, I guess in AWS it's called organizations or whatever. So each of the groups, you know, get to sort of own their kingdom, right? But the central team does have visibility and control and best practice sharing across all of the teams.
Great. And finally, it looks like if someone already has Argo, how do they add the automated analysis to an existing environment? Is that supported?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so when I shared this ISD platform, I mean, obviously we see that there's a pain point in managing for customers to multiple Argo instances, etc. You know, like even setting it up and managing SSO and all those things. So, but if you say, you know what, I've already figured all of them out, and I don't need your need for that, but I do like your analysis, like Hendrik here mentioned here. You know, can I use it to just use analysis? Absolutely. I think, you know, two large users of Argo today are evaluating and working with us just on that piece, right? And this is something very interesting for them because the existing analysis, you know, the thing is, at the end of the day, if you're using Argo, you're probably going to go really fast. You want to go really fast, and that's why you're going to this rollout anyway, right? But then if you roll out something bad really fast, that will cause real bad problems really fast. So you want to be able to do a rollout and also do a better intelligent analysis of it, and that's where we come in, and we can definitely help you out on any. If you're using OSS, no problem.
Great, Balaji. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I think it gives a very good overview of what OpsMX is doing to support the Argo community. And I want to thank everybody today for taking the time out and joining us. This recording will be available. We'll send it out along with the slides. If you have any questions, you have our contact information, info@opsmx.com. Check out the playground as well, and our website, opsmx.com. And with that, I want to wish everybody a great day and thank you very much. Goodbye.